Alright, hi guys. Today my topic of conversation is homosexuality. And before going into my claim, I'm going to give some introduction. Merriam-Webster defines being homosexual as being sexually attracted to people of the same sex. There are social connotations that exist in society. Gay people are treated differently in society, even though they shouldn't, but that's a different conversation. That's a different speech. The acceptance of homosexuality has improved over recent years, but there is still prejudice and bias, whether it be direct or indirect. People make conscious and unconscious decisions to look at them and treat them differently. So continuing on with that, there's a debate whether being gay is natural or if it's a choice. People question whether the choice, like people that say that it is a choice, question whether being gay is caused by society or the culture that surrounds them, and whether it's conscious or subconscious. But my main claim is that homosexuality is a genetically determined trait. Being gay is the result of genetic variation. It is not a choice, as some people claim. Homosexual people are born that way, and their natural sexual orientation is out of their control. I'm going to talk about what scientists have to say, similar patterns in nature, and what opposing sides say, and my response to that. First of all, scientific evidence shows that there are genetic differences between heterosexual and homosexual people. There is no gay gene, as in there's no singular gene that if you have it, it guarantees that you're gay. But having more of a specific gene has been shown in homosexual people. 2014 study in the journal Psychological Medicine showed that a gene on the X chromosome, one of the sex chromosomes called XQ28, seemed to be found in higher prevalence in people that are homosexual. And that study involved over 400 gay people. So there is a genetic difference between gay and straight people. Also, and this is a slightly minor addition to the whole genetic thing, but a smaller study has shown that it could possibly be something of inheritance. There was a study in the U.S. National Cancer Institute that investigated the family histories of more than 100 gay men and found that homosexuality tended to be inherited, in the sense that more than 10% of brothers of gay men were also gay, in contrast to 3% in the general population if you were to compare one person to another person. And also, uncles and male cousins on the mother's side had a greater average chance of being gay too. So that's a smaller argument to the genetic thing, but I think it's worth pointing out. As a secondary point, humans are not the only beings or species in existence to exhibit same-sex behavior. Many other animals, birds, lions, chimpanzees, dolphins, bison, nearly 130 bird species have shown to engage in homosexual behavior. So this doesn't exactly disprove that homosexuality is a product of human society and human culture, but it shows that humans aren't the only humans aren't the only species to have exhibited that type of behavior. So because detractors, one of their big arguments is that like modern human society and culture subconsciously or consciously makes people gay, and I don't think that is really a valid argument. And then, just as a side note, I'd like to talk about what opposers have to say to the claim that homosexuality is a genetic thing. There are a lot of religious groups that talk about how being gay is unnatural, according to what they think is natural. But I think that if it comes to the classification of like people, that's a scientific matter, and that religious groups don't exactly use empirical proof to justify how they categorize other people. As a conclusion, my first and most important argument for my claim is that genetic studies have shown that specific genes have been found in higher numbers in homosexual people than they have in straight people. Also, studies have shown that homosexuality has some patterns in inheritance. And this helps the argument that it is not merely a creation of human society. Thank you.
All right, Mark, the proposition's clearly identified. You do have a preview. It sounds like there are 3 or 4 supporting points. The last 2 were not very clearly expressed, so that was a little bit confusing. But the first point, it's basically a science argument, although you do need a declarative sentence to go along with that, and I thought that that was a little bit problematic. You deny the existence of a gay gene, but you suggest that there is some kind of genetic link, and you've got an example of a study that you make reference to, and I thought that that was pretty good information for that particular point. It's a little underwhelming. The second study that you cite has another statistical relationship that it's presenting, so that helps a bit in making that argument a little more generalizable, but I can see ways in which it might be used by a person on the other side to make a different argument based on the infrequency with which this occurs and the relationship of brothers becoming gay. That might reflect, instead of the characteristic being inherited, it might be a result of nurture and the circumstances in which a family happens to exist. They may have characteristics or behaviors that are passing on that don't have anything to do with the physiology or the genealogy of people involved in those circumstances. The arguments got a little bit less clear after that particular point. You made a mention of the existence of homosexual behavior in nature. I didn't hear any source citations on that. I heard a reference to 130 species that engage in some kind of homosexual behavior. Again, the frequency with which that occurs, the circumstances under which it occurs, probably would determine whether or not we would see that as being relevant on this particular point. I know that you're kind of using it as a rebuttal issue, but I'm not sure by itself it answers some of the qualms that people who say that it is socially generated or psychologically produced are going to present their arguments on. Your last 2 arguments, they weren't very clear. I mean, I know that you have an argument about the opponents, and you say we shouldn't be using religious criteria, we should be using scientific criteria, but your scientific criteria need to be a lot more extensive if that's what we're going to rely on. And I think that there's also a potential argument there, again, using the statistic that the other side might make in suggesting that that it exists is probably not in doubt. That it is normal or natural might be contradicted by the infrequency with which it exists. I think that might be the argument that somebody could advance to support an opposing position here. You're very low-key in the way you deliver the information, which is not necessarily a bad thing, and you generally have good audience contact. The summary at the end of the presentation was fine. Thank you.